didn't work. Or maybe it was just very weak, it was still alive, and the slaughtering killed it. So you really have to somehow prove that it died with the slaughtering and it wasn't already dead, because it was in danger before. And it must be that when we talk about a danger, it couldn't be one of the 18 trephos. We know that there are all sorts of physical, wounds that mean that it's going to be a treifa, whether it's a hole in the membrane around the brain or holes in the lung. So it wasn't one of those things, but it was very, very weak. Okay, says the Mishnah, a person who slaughters an animal who's in danger. So Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says it's not kosher unless after the shchita it moves both the hand and the foot. If it moves both the hand and the foot, both the 2 feet in the front and the 2 feet in the back, so then you know that it was alive all the way to the end, and it died because of the shchita.
But maybe the meat is contaminated because you were sick.
I guess we're not so concerned about that. Rabbi Lezer says, Dayim Zinka. We could be sure that it was alive till the very end, and the shchita killed it, if we see that there was this guttural coughing up of blood, this sort of sharp gush of blood. If it gushed out blood at the end, then you see it's alive, because a dead animal wouldn't be gushing out blood. Rabbi Shimon seems to be something similar. Rabbi Shimon says, Ashochet balayla. Let's say somebody slaughters one such animal at night. He doesn't see what it does afterwards. And the next morning, Hishkim got up, and he sees that the walls of the neck are filled with blood, that the animal had, coughed up a gush of blood, sheira. Then you know it's kasher, shazinka, because that shows you that the animal coughed up blood, pushed up blood strongly. That's like the view of Rabbi Lezer, that you don't need the animal to move all of its legs and feet and hands to see that it's alive till the very end. Just the very fact that it coughs up blood sharply, that's a sign that it was alive till the very end. The Chacham disagree with Rabbi Lezer. They disagree also with Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said you have to have both the movement of Yad and Ragel in order to see that it was alive till the very end. And the Chachamim say, until it convulses, o biyad o beragel, either with the foot or with the hand, o achetachashkesh biznava, or if it waves its tail. If it's waving its tail, it's also a sign that it is alive. Now, echad behema daka, this applies to a thin animal like a goat, echad behema gasa, or a thick animal like a cow. If they were misukenes, if they were very sick, they need these movements to show that they are alive. Let's say you have a thin animal. It put out its hand after the shchita, or with the end of the shchita, but it didn't put the hand back. And it was a misukenes. It just put its hand out. That's psula. That's not a sign that it's alive yet. Okay, it's just the life leaving, so it moves the hand out. But if you had to move the hand, moving the hand back and forth, that would be the sign of that it's alive. When is this true? The animal was assumed not to be doing well. But if it had been presumed healthy, it was a healthy animal, and then it's slaughtered. Even if it doesn't move a hand back and forth, it doesn't move a leg, it doesn't wave its tail, it doesn't do any of these things. Sheira, it's kasher because we assume that it was alive, it was becheskas alive. It's the shchita that killed it, and that's what makes it kosher.
Rabbi, if it does a resistance, then it's has a
Also
koach, so he's alive.
That could be too. That could
Yeah,
be too.
right?
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, question.
What category is it? A cheskas mishukana? Just meaning if it's like lethargic or something.
We're going to see. Yeah, the Gemara is going to talk about the definition of Mitzukenes, but yeah, it's the Gemara is going to say that you're going to stand it up, and it just doesn't have the strength to stay standing.
And the shrit is still valid? Or that's the
It
question?
could be valid if we see,
Inspection.
or if at the end of the shchita it's moving around, so we see that there's life there. So if at the end of the shchita it's moving its feet forward and back, then we see there's life. Or if at the end of the shchita it moves one of its legs, that would be a sign of life. So the Gemara says, Mesukenes mimai desharya. How do we know, basically Baruch's question, how do we know that if an animal is so lethargic, if you stand it up, it collapses, it can't stand, that it's allowed, and the shchita works? Right? We say we have to make sure that it wasn't dead. As long as it wasn't dead before the shchita, it would work. How do we know that such a thing is allowed? All right, so 1 second. And from where would you think that it's not allowed? From where would come a thought that it's not allowed? Why wouldn't it be allowed? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you, because the pasuk says, "Zos hachaya asher tochlu." This is the living animal that you should eat. So I would tell you, chayecho. If it's alive, then you eat it. If it's an animal that's alive, then you can kill it and eat it. However, she'ena chaya, an animal that's not destined to live, lo tochlam, I think you're not allowed to eat it. V'mesukenes eina chaya. And this dying animal, I shouldn't say dying animal, this very, very lethargic, very ill animal is not going to live in the future. And so since it's not going to live in the future, maybe it's not allowed. That's why I need a pasuk.
Is this Makor
What's the
for
pasuk?
is this Makor for Treifa?
No, there's a separate pasuk. Uvasar basada treifa lo tochelu. Pasuk speaks about treifa. In other words, treifa, to me, always sounds like savage, right? When Yosef's tunic is presented to his father says, Torof, Toraf, Yosef. Yosef was savage. So treifa is implying some type of wounds.
This is physical evidence of the.
Yeah, not just general malaise, and lethargic, and no energy.
There's no havmin to say this is it falls into the rubric of Treifa.
We're going to see. The Gemara will say that. No, that is the havmina. The havmina is that it is the part of treifa. That is the havmina.
So if an animal is not feeling well, you just have to get there before Malach HaMorat gets
Exactly. Exactly. Very good. You put it very nicely. If the animal's not feeling well, you have to be sure that your shchita got to it before Malach HaMavis got it.
Yeah, right.
So that's what the Mishnah has. 3 different opinions. How do you see that your shchita got it before Malach HaMavis got it? According to Rabbi Zev Reichman, a hand and a foot have to move. According to Rabbi Lezer, it's enough if it just, coughs up with a gush of blood. Shimon agrees with Rabbi Lezer. And Chacham say you don't need to have both a hand and a foot. You can have either a hand or a foot or the waving of a tail. So if any of that happened with the close of the shchita, then you know that your shchita got it before Malach HaMavis got it. But if Malach HaMavis gets it first, then it doesn't work. Right? Very good. Okay, very good. So again, the Mishnah is talking about an animal that's, very, very weak. It's on its way to death. So Gemara said, why is it allowed? What's the pasuk saying that such a thing works? That if you shechted it before death got to it, that it's allowed. So Gemara says, well, why would I think it's not allowed? I'll tell you why I would think it's not allowed. Because the Torah talks about, so sachaya asher tochlu. This is the living animal that you eat. Sounding like you eat an animal that's on its way to life. But an animal that's on its way to death, maybe you wouldn't be able to eat.
But you're talking about an old animal, not a young animal.
Any animal.
Doesn't
Could be
matter.
old, could be young. The point is, when you stand it up, it falls down again.
But
It's
if it's-
very weak.
If it's a young animal, it's a sign of sickness.
Okay. Yeah.
So
A sick animal can also be shechted.
it can? I thought it can't be.
No, we're seeing you could. A treifa animal, you can't. An animal with, we'll see in the next chapter what all the different signs of a treifa are. But apparently, a sick animal, very weak and lethargic, could be shechted.
Even if it can't stand on its own.
Exactly, even though it can't stand on its own. So at the same way you're wondering about it, the Gemara is wondering about it, right? The Gemara says, Mimai desharia. From what source do you have that such a thing is permitted? Mm-hmm. Why would it be permitted? Doesn't seem to fit with the same concept that treifa is not permitted. So now the Gemara is going to try to prove a source, try to find a source to tell me how we know mesukenes is permitted. So proposal number 1. We are 4 lines into the Gemara. Number 1, Mida Amar Rachmana, from the fact that Hashem says, Nevela lo tochel. Right? Nevela lo tochel. Hashem says, don't eat nevela. That's a pasuk in Devarim. Lo tochlu kol nevela. Don't eat any nevela. Now what's nevela? Nevela is an animal that is dead, and it was not dead because of shchita. It's dead for some other reason. What are most of those animals? Most of the animals that are dead not because of shchita are dead because of malach hamaves. And if it's dead because of malach hamaves, then it was probably sick before, right? How did it become dead because of malach hamaves? Probably because it was sick. So michlal. So you see, once it's dead, it's a problem. But the mesukenes. But once it was very sick, sharia was allowed. So you see that mesukenes is allowed. Mesukenes asira, because if you're going to think to say mesukenes is not allowed, so most of the nevelos were mesukenes before they were nevela. Most of the dead animals were very sick and lethargic before they dropped dead. So if you're going to tell me that if it's very sick, it's no longer allowed. So hashtamechayim asira. So this animal already was not allowed when it was alive because it was very sick. So now la'achar misa mibaya. So do I need another pasuk to tell me lo sochlu kol nevela? Don't eat nevela. I can't eat it. It was mesukenes. Once it's mesukenes, I can't eat it. So Gemara says that really that's not such a good proof. The dilma may be hainu nevela hainu mesukenes. You're right. Really, before it died, it was also not allowed. And really, it's already nevela before it dies. Once it's mesukenes, it's nevela. And the purpose of the pasuk is to say that there is a prohibition. There's a lav. Mesukenes maybe is prohibited from an asay. So sachaya sher tochlu. Don't only eat that which is living. Don't eat that which is lethargic. I'm not going to keep on living. That's an asay. And then nevela, lo sochlu kol nevela. Once it dies, there's also a lav. So the Gemara says, lo sal kadaitach. You can't think to say that. Because the pasuk says, I'm sorry, and even before it dies, it's called nevela. So the lav applies to before it dies. In other words, on the pasuk of zosachaya, there would be an asay that prohibiting mesukenes. And I have a pasuk of lo sochlu kol nevela to say that there is also a lav too. There's also a prohibition in eating mesukenes and nevela. So lo sakadai, you can't think to say that. Because the pasuk says, v'chiyamos min habehema asher yilachem la'achla, and when it will die from those animals that are for you to be eating, hanogeh b'nivlasa, one who touches the dead carcass becomes tameh. So that's telling you, le'achar misu dekaya rachmana nevela. Only once it dies does Hashem call it nevela. But mechayim lo ipi nevela. And therefore, when it's alive, it's not called nevela. So therefore, if when it's alive it's not called nevela, why do I need a pasuk of lo sochlu kol nevela? I already know that it's not allowed, because when it was alive it wasn't allowed, because it was mesukenes. So the Gemara says, no. The Dilma maybe la'olamim l'chai could tell you forever, hainu nevela, hainu mesukenes. Really, nevela is an animal that was in danger, and it was already prohibited before it died. And then when it dies, it becomes more prohibited with the verse lo sochlu kol nevela. And I need a pasuk, because when it was alive, it was just an asay, and the pasuk is saying that after it dies, it's an asay and a lav. Mechayim, it's only an asay. And the achar misa, it's with an asay and a lav. Okay, so nevela is not the proof. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה b'dvaro.
Amen.
There's no mitzvah to cover the blood of a nevela?
No.
Only shchita.
Only shchita.
Let's say you go hunting,
Or roadkill, you know.
there's no mitzvah to cover the body.
So nevela is asur.
Oh yeah.
Okay, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so again, we're in this following problem. The Mishnah tells us that an animal that's very lethargic,
I know.
it's very weak. Shvach, I think, is a good title for it. Right? It's a very weak animal. So the animal like this, we're not sure that we got it before the Malach HaMavis got it. Maybe the Malach HaMavis got it and we're just shechting what's already dead. So 3 different opinions in the Mishnah. What would be enough proof to tell us that it really was killed through the shechita? Rabbi Lezer, coughing up a lot of blood, according to Rabbi Shimon. Agrees with Rabbi Lezer, Shimon Gamliel, moving a hand and a foot, and the view of the Chacham moving either a hand or a foot or waving the tail. The Gemara says, how do I know that a Mesukenes is allowed? The Gemara had proposed, maybe the reason why I know that it's allowed is because the Torah says Nevela is not allowed. So Mesukenes, Nevela was Mesukenes before it was Nevela. So if Mesukenes would not be allowed, why would the Torah need to say that Nevela is not allowed? The final conclusion is that's not such a question. Maybe before it was Nevela, it was an Isser Aseh. Once it's Nevela, it's also an Isser Lav. It's a Lav and an Aseh. That's what the Torah says, Lo Sochlu Kol Nevela. So what's the source that Mesukenes is allowed? Ella, so rather the source is, and this was the point David was bringing up, Midam Rachmana for the following. Hashem says, Treifa lo tocha. Don't eat treifa. Hashem said, Anshe kodesh tiyum li, uvasar basadeh treifa lo sochelu, akelev tashlichu nosa. You should be holy people to me. Meat in the field, treifa, don't eat. Throw it to the dogs. Hashem said, treifa should not be eaten. Now, as Rashi points out, what's treifa? Treifa is savage. A hole in the membrane around the brain, a leg cut off, missing a limb. That's treifa, right? A hollow in the thigh. So from that fact, Hashem says treifa lo tochelu. Michlal, that implies the mesukenes sharia. That if something is just very ill, an animal is very ill, it's not missing any part, that's already allowed. Because if you're going to tell me that mesukenes is not allowed, hashda mesukenes, when you have everything there, nothing's missing. And nevertheless, asira, it's not allowed because it's weak. Treifa, so then when you have a part missing, major wound, nibaya, of course it wouldn't be good, right? If you're going to tell me that mesukenes is no good, certainly treifa is no good. The fact that Hashem has to tell you that treifa is not kosher, that's to tell you that if it's very ill because of a treifa, because of some type of wound, something missing, that's not kosher. But just very ill, that is kosher.
So, Rabbi, if an animal is missing a leg, that would make it terefa?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Absolutely.
That's not a vital organ, though.
I think it is above the knee. The Gemara says above the knee. It's hard. I'm not so sure the animal can survive missing a leg above the knee. It's a whole discussion above the knee versus beneath the knee, as we'll get to soon.
So Rabbi Nevela is worse than terefa? It is, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, yes. So the Gemara now says, Vidilman maybe. Hainu treif, hainu mesukenes. Maybe this is the proposal that David had. Maybe when an animal's very ill and it's very weak and it can't get up on its own or can't stay up on its own, it's also called treifa. Anything that's doesn't seem like it's going to live for very long is already called a treifa. And mesukenes is also called treifa.
People get sick, animals get sick too, and then
Yeah.
get worse. So all of a sudden
Okay,
it becomes
good. Then
terefa.
maybe that's the answer. Maybe we don't have a good way of measuring that.
Yeah,
Whereas treifa, we
right.
could measure that.
Yeah.
So the Gemara is proposing, though, maybe treifa includes mesukenes, like David said. So then you'll ask, well, why don't you need 2 psukim? Zosachaya sher tochlu, to say not mesukenes, and uvasar basada treifa lo sochelu. I'll tell you. V'lavar olav basei v'lo tasei. So that a person would violate both an asay and a lo tasei if it is a treifa. Or maybe in every situation, mesukenes is an asay and a lo tasei. The Gemara says, Im Kain, if so, Nevela the Kasar Rachman Alamali. Why does Hashem have to create a prohibition of Nevela? If when it was alive, as a Mesukenes, it has both a lav and an asay. Is it even a question that after death it's going to have those prohibitions? So Gemara says, maybe. The Dilma, maybe. You're right. If it drops dead, it's now Nevela too. And beforehand it had been Treifa and it was Mesukenes. The lav of Bishnei lavim v'asay. And maybe the prohibition is 2 lavim. 2 prohibitions plus an asay. That's where you have the pasuk. Alright, so this is not a proof.
So you have some matara, you'd have 2 lavs for the same thing.
Yeah, we had in Maseches Makos, right? You eat a bug, you can have 8 lavim in the bug.
Right. So once tell you how severe it is.
And the more severe it is, the impact is in regards, let's say, to someone who's sick, right? And you want to do the less Aveira, because he needs to do some Aveira, you want to do a lesser Aveira. There's an impact in terms of where he gets buried. People are not supposed to be buried next to
they should have made the category,
righteous.
why you care if the category is not because number of lavs, because of Tumah and Tahara. Right? There's a different status in Treif and Avela.
Also true. But that's not the lav of Lo Sochelu. That's Anokei Abin of Lasam Yitzma. Elamehacha. So rather, this is the source that Mesukenes is allowed. The Torah says, in regards to the prohibition of chelev, of the prohibited fats, the verse says, v'chelev nevela, v'chelev of a nevela, or chelev treifa, ge'asa l'chom malacha, you can use it, but v'acholo sochlu, but you're not allowed to eat it. Amar Mar, and we have a tradition later on in the Masechta, Mamai Hilchasa Amra Torah. In regards, once it says, the Torah says, V'acholo tochlu. So why did Hashem have to say V'acholo tochlu? It was chelev. Because it's in a veil or a treifa, it's still chelev. So why does it say Acholo tochlu? So the Gemara says like this. Mamai Hilchasa Amra Rachman. The point is the following. You might have thought if it was chelev, it can't also become nevela. So yavo iser nevela, v'yachol iser chelev. It's to say no, it was chelev, but now that it's nevela, there's 2 prohibitions in eating it. One that you're eating chelev, and one that you're eating nevela. Yavo iser treifa. Now that it's a treifa, the prohibition of treifa will come. V'yachol iser chelev. Take effect on that which is already prohibited as chelev. Okay, that's the pasuk. The pasuk says, don't eat the chelev of nevela and treifa. What do I need that for? I can't eat any chelev. I have to say, don't eat the chelev of nevela and treifa. The answer is, you might have thought that since I couldn't eat it anyway because of chelev, so the prohibition of nevela and treifa shouldn't be added on. Ein yisur chalal isur. There's the pasuk to say that no, it does get added on. Now ask the Gemara of Yisak Adaita if you're going to tell me treifa hainu mesukenes, that treifa is mesukenes. Mesukenes is already a treifa. So then lichtav rachmana, then Hashem should just say chelev nevela ye'asa l'chol malacha. The chelev of nevela, you can use it. There's no tuma. In regards to eating, it should say the chelev treifa lo tochlu. And don't eat the chelev of treifa. I'll tell you like this. If treifa is included in the word, if miskenes is included in treifa, let's say like this. Here when it was alive, there already was the prohibition of miskenes, of treifa. And it took effect on top of the isur chelev. Now that it dropped dead, what was to take it away? Ella, so why? So that's what we would have thought. But for the fact that Hashem has to write that the prohibition of the Vela took effect, that's to tell me that when the animal was alive, as a Mesukenes, it's not a treifa. So I need a pasuk to say, and a Mesukenes, which was prohibited, Mesukenes, that dies. Now that it dies, it becomes prohibited, so the prohibition takes effect even on top of chelev. But when it was alive, there was no prohibition.
The meaning of Mesukenes is treifa. No?
No. I'm saying not. No.
Okay, so then I got mixed up here.
No, Misukenes is very ill. Very ill.
Very ill.
That's right.
So it could be, it could be a treifa. You know, it was so bad, ill.
Well, the treifa is certain physical things that we find when we examine it inside. Maskefla Mar Baravashi challenged this proof. The Dilma and maybe Lola I could tell you, Haidu treifa, Haidu Misukenes. That maybe Misukenes, when it's very ill, it has the status of treifa. Udakar Marta, so then you asked, Nevela the Kasav Rachman Alamali, why does Hashem have to tell me that once it becomes Nevela, it's still prohibited as Chelev? I'll tell you. There can be a situation in Nevela when an animal was healthy and it became a Nevela. Right? Not every Nevela is that it was first Mesukenes and then it became Nevela. So this pasuk is for those situations when it was healthy and then it becomes a Nevela. What would be a case like that? A guy comes with a big scythe, some knife, and he chops the animal into two. There's a healthy animal walking around, he takes a knife and he cuts it into two. So that's an avela now. It wasn't a shechita. It was cut in the middle of the body. It's not a shechita. It's an avela. Cut into two, but it was very healthy a second before. So it wasn't that it was the chalev had a prohibition on it before. It should certainly have it after death. It didn't have a prohibition before. The Torah has to say that in such a case, an avela takes effect even on top of the prohibition of chalev. But it's not a proof that misukenes is permitted. So the Gemara said, no. Hasam nami, in that case too, before it actually dies, it's not possible. Before you got to a majority of it being cut, it was already misukenes. Before you got to a majority. And if you're going to say misukenes is already treifa, the prohibition already took effect. So then why do I need a pasuk to say that the nevela prohibition is going to take effect? Why? Of course it would take effect. So it must be that misukenes is not prohibited. And only nevela is prohibited, and treifa is prohibited, but misukenes is not prohibited. You by saying alternatively, I could give you another source. How do we know that misukenes is permitted? Imkain, if you're right, that misukenes is prohibited. Lema, the Torah should have said, chelev nevelo treifa, the fat of a nevela and a treifa doesn't have tumah, v'cholo tochluhu, and don't eat it. And then I would say that the prohibition of nevela and the prohibition of treifa take effect on top of the prohibition of chelev. Chelev lamali. Why does the Torah keep repeating the word chelev? It says v'chelev nevela, v'chelev treifa. Why does it keep saying the word chelev? The fact that it keeps saying the word chelev is to say zoe shein chal b'chalak mi basara. This animal, her chelev is no different from her flesh. In the treifa, the flesh is prohibited, and the chelev is prohibited. However, yesh l'cha acheres, but there is a different chelev. Shachel b'chalak mi basara, where the chelev is prohibited, but the meat is not prohibited. What's that? That's misukenes. An animal who's very ill, the chelev is prohibited because it's chelev, but the meat of the animal is not prohibited. Ibay Sema to tell you a third source that misukenes is permitted.
But the chelev not to eat, to do something else with it, make soap or whatever.
That's
right.
Yeah. Ibay Sema, I can give you a third possibility. What's the source that a very sick animal, but it doesn't have any wounds, it doesn't have any of the 18 signs of trephos, is kosher. Ibay Sema, if you want, I can tell you like this. It's from a pasuk in Yecheskel. Hashem told him that to atone for the sins of the Jewish people, he should afflict himself with certain things. I see here in the footnote it says he was told for 390 days to lay down on his left side and then to lay down on his right side for 40 days. And during that period, he was supposed to eat, disgusting bread, only with a certain amount, and the baking of the bread would be very disgusting. So Yecheskel says back to Hashem, Aha, Ay, Hashem Elokim, Hine nafshi lo mituma. My soul has never been made impure. Unevelo treifa lo achalti min urai vad ata. Unevelo or treifa I haven't eaten from my youth till now. V'lo ba b'fi b'sar pigel. And no, contaminated meat has ever come into my mouth. So how are you telling me to do these disgusting things. So what does that pasuk mean? Of course, Yecheskel didn't eat non-kosher. I didn't eat nevela and treifa. Of course, it's Yecheskel. So what does he mean? He means like this. Behold, my soul's never become tameh. Doesn't mean that I've never become tameh at all, because that's obvious. He was a Kohen. Kohen was never allowed to become tameh. What it means is, in a moral sense, I didn't have thoughts by day about, intercourse, about, women, and that would have caused lavo lidei tuma balayla. Because if I'd have thoughts like that by day, then during the night when I'm sleeping, I might have had a emission of seed. So I never thought by day in a way that would cause me to have a discharge at night. And then when Yecheskel says, and I never ate nevela and treifa, of course he wouldn't eat nevela and treifa. No one's allowed to eat nevela and treifa. What he meant was, shelo achalti b'sar kos kos me'olam. I never ate the meat of an animal that's very sick. Because an animal that's very sick, people say kos kos. They say, hurry, hurry. Let's slaughter it before the Malach HaMavis gets to it. Exactly as Baruch said. So I never ate such animals. Because I was worried. Maybe the slaughter happened after the Malach HaMavis got to it. And then when he says, v'lo ba b'fi b'sar pigul, and I never had in my mouth meat that was contaminated, of course. Who's going to have meat which is contaminated? If someone during one of the major acts of service of a korban is thinking to eat the meat at the wrong time, the meat becomes a prohibition of karis to eat. What does that mean? It means shelo achalti mi behema. I never ate from an animal. Shahora b'chacha. Let's say there was some problem in the animal, and we thought it wasn't okay. Then we brought it to a sage. He said, no, it's really okay. I wouldn't eat it. We had thought it was not okay. I wouldn't eat it. In the name of Reb Nassan, they say a different explanation. It means even though he's a Kohen, he said, I wouldn't eat from any animal where they didn't give from the animal the parts that are supposed to be given to the Kohanim, even though really he's a Kohen himself. He said, I wouldn't eat until they separated the Zerah l'chayim v'keva. So now, if you're going to tell me that a mesukenes, an animal that's not well, is basically permitted, now we understand what Yecheskel is saying. His whole point is that I'm doing things beyond the absolute standard. So then this is allowed. So he's saying, but he doesn't eat it. But if you're going to tell me that mesukenes is always prohibited, it's a treifa, as David was proposing, what's Yecheskel adding in what he's saying? So that would be the third possible source that mesukenes is allowed. Hey, chidam mesukenes. Okay, what is this case of an animal that's very sickly? Rav Yehuda Marav, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav. Kol shema midin osa, we stand it up. Ve'ino medes, it doesn't have the strength to stay standing. It falls down. Rav Chanina bar Shlemya mishmei de Rav Amar. Rav Chanina, the son of Shlemya, said in the name of Rav. Afilu ocheles bekiyos. The earliest time for talis and tefillin today is 6:26, so we'll start at 6:20 or so.
So if the animal stands up and falls down, it's allowed, though.
Still allowed, yeah.
I thought it wasn't, because I remember when a couple of years ago when it was mad cow disease, the cows weren't able to stand, and they said it didn't affect kosher animals because kosher animals had to stand.
Well, we're going to see that there are things that are simane treifa. Let's say the brain has changed the color. So instead of being, no, when you open it up, you see that it's white, it's pale. So that's no good. If it's mesukenes, that could be. It could be that if it doesn't stand, so these are things that we would do to check. So the Gemara says an amazing thing. The animals on the floor, it's ocheles bekios. It's eating pieces of wood. It's strong. It's chewing through logs. It's chewing through wood. It's chewing through wood chips. But still, it's weak. And then already it's a mesukenes, and you have to have these various proofs that it was alive at the shechita. Rabbi Yecheskel Amar, Rabbi Yecheskel said, Afilu ocheles koros, even if it's eating beams of wood. A whole beam that's going across a roof, it can eat the beam, but it can't stand. Doesn't mean it's healthy. It's still a mesukenes. It may have dropped dead before we got it, You have to see that at the end it was moving around. The Surah Masni Hacha. Surah, this is the version of the argument between Rami Bar Yecheskel and Rav Chanina Bar Shlamya. However, B'Pumbedisa Masni Hacha. This is the version. Eichidami Mesukenes. What is the case of an animal that's very ill? Amar Yehuda Amar Rav Kol Shemamitin Osaveino Medes. You stand it up and it still can't stand. Va'afilu Ocheles B'Kiyos. And even if it's eating chopped pieces of wood, it's still Mesukenes. Bar Yecheskel Amar. Bar Yecheskel, according to this version, is the one who says Afilu Ocheles Koros. Even if it eats. Not Reb Chanina Bar Shalmya. Here it was Reb Yehuda Marav and Rami Bar Yecheskel. In this version, like in the first version, says Afilu Ochelas Koros, even if it is eating beams.
What would there be any proof for the animal eats wood and beams?
Seems very strong. So it's telling you that even though the mouth is strong, if it can't stand, it's a weak animal. And it's on its way to the Malach HaMaves. And then you have to worry that maybe it actually died before you slit the pipes. But if after you slit the pipes, it's still moving around, then you know that the slitting of the pipes is what killed it, and not that it was dead before you slit the pipes.
So that's why they say hurry, hurry.
They're saying hurry, hurry. That's right, because they don't want it to die before the pipes are slit.
But I've never seen an animal eating wood, Rabbi.
You never saw animals eat wood.
It means biting, not
Biting, chewing through it. All right, Ashkechinu Shmuel Talmudei de Rav. Shmuel met the students of Rav. Amaluhu Mayam Rav Misukenes. He said, what was Rav's novel idea about Misukenes? Amrulei Hachi Amarav. They said, this is what Rav said. If a Misukenes at the moment of the slaughtering is goa, is screaming, it's braying, or it's dropping poop, or kiskasa biznava, or waving its tail, that is the equivalent of convulsing and moving a hand back and forth, moving a foot back and forth. That's a sign that it was alive till the very end. The shechita killed it, and it is permitted to be eaten.
Is he arguing on our Mishnah, or is he just explaining it?
I think he's explaining.